The last thing I thought we could do for a video lesson today is to take a look at the different things that you would need to know how to do for the written theory test for AIM. This is the week where I'm giving out the information for the sign-up sheet for people, and it's due back in like 2 weeks, so you have time to think about whether you want to do it or not. So I thought what we do is just look at what some of the theory test requirements would be today. I know you and I already talked about, excuse Ted, you and I have talked about the different keyboard requirements, and it's one of the reasons why you're learning the 1-octave arpeggios. You know, each hand is doing the 1 octave by itself. And you know all of your white key scales already, so I think the only other thing we have to talk about are just some broken and blocked chords, which that's not going to be too hard. So that today it might be good for you to just get an idea of some of the things that you would be doing on the theory test, and then we can start practicing them as we get closer to the AIM date. So I'm going to turn the camera around and just show you what's in my book. And hopefully you can see that all right. They always have a part about trying to figure out intervals. This year, you would be required to know all of the intervals between a second and an octave. And they would just show you an interval, and you would have to say whether it's a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, or an octave. So this one is probably too small for you to be able to see, because it's pretty small. But it would be a sixth. You can tell you have a space note at the bottom, a line note at the top, and you've got space in between. They're also going to have you write some triads. These are not going to be hard, tricky triads, but just to know, can you, if they said write a D major triad, and we'll practice doing these at your lesson, but if you had any staff paper, I remember last year I thought about trying to get everybody a piece of staff paper in their folder so that when we have these kinds of lessons, you could do a few practices. If you do have some and you want to practice writing some triads, the idea is to make sure, if you can see the answer on this one, D major would have the F sharp there for the third note, because that's how we have to have a major third at the bottom of the triad if it's a major chord. So you'll have to be able to write some triads. I think they only usually have a couple of those on there. They're also going to show you 2 different scales, and this is supposed to be for A major, so they want you to know, do you know how many sharps should be in the A major scale? And you would look at both of these and hopefully decide that it was this one, because this is the one with the 3 sharps, which is what A major is. Remember, you can always check. We've tried to memorize that whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half formula for a major scale, so you can always double check and see, does that look like a whole step, half step, and so forth. And these are all things that we can work on. It's your lesson before the AIM Festival comes. They'll have a cadence, and these are always usually, they'll have a choice A and B. They're not trying to trick you at all. They will always put at this level at least, they'll always put the 1 chord stacked up like that. The 5/7 chord will have the second at the top, and if there happened to be a 4 chord, there would be a third at the top of the chord. So it's, I think for ear level there you would just be, oh, it does say you could have a 4 chord. So it's not trying to trip you up, just to see if you can recognize them. And I know we've tried to label these, so this shouldn't be hard for you. Hopefully you can tell that that's a 1 chord, 5/7, 1, so you would pick the answer B. And then the incomplete measures, we've practiced these before, where they'll give you so many beats. You have to look at the time signature and figure out what kind of note or rest you could add to finish that and complete the 2 beats. So you notice in this case you have 1.5. So you could put in an 8th note, you could put in another 8th rest. Either of those would be correct answers. They put in an 8th note. And then our terms. Some of these I know you know. Some of them might be ones that we have to work on. I know you know, let's start from the bottom up, what an 8th rest looks like, because we've played those, or not played on those, should we say. Dotted quarter notes are something that's not unfamiliar to you. Subdominant being the fourth note or degree of a scale. We've talked about the subdominant chord. The 4 chord is the subdominant chord. So I'm guessing that that's not an unusual term to you, but it might just need some review. Time signature is that the numbers that we find at the beginning of a measure to tell us how many. Top number tells us how many beats are in each measure. The bottom number tells us what kind of note is going to get one beat. The definition given here is meter. It shows the unit of beats in a composition. I think you would recognize it. Remember that the terms are multiple choice. No, is that what I mean? Matching. It's matching. Accelerando, gradually getting faster. Pianissimo, which would be the 2 P's, very soft. Fortissimo, very loud. Largo, very slow. Lento, a slow tempo. Adagio, a slow tempo. And a tempo means to return to the original tempo. If they would have had you do like a ritardando, or you've had a fermata or something like that, they oftentimes might put an a tempo to make sure that you go back to the original one. So there are the things that you would need to know for this year's theory test. And what I'd like you to do is, next time we talk, after you've watched this, you can help me figure out which of the things are easy for you and which of the things will need a little bit more practice that we can work on here during your lessons, or I can send some worksheet things home with you too. So, all right, so there's your theory test.